They loved playing, they loved music, they loved to give their best, you know. You love these people, the musicians, too, because they remain human beings. It was a very unusual experience because actually unlimited different ways of producing sound with this orchestra combined with rather very well-developed technique, you know. It is an amazing flexible orchestra. Still very much keeping their style, but open to any enrichment, yeah? So really, if you have a good idea, they could really realize and wanted to realize. I thought a lot about what could cause this kind of character. It was, of course, founded as a recording orchestra. You see, it's a totally different approach. We do it here, and an hour later it has to be forever. That's a real tremendous challenge for an orchestra. It was a huge honor because still I had my Cleveland behind. I was with the Orchestra de Paris. I was, in those days, already pretty well-known conductor. But I must say, to inherit the Klemperer Orchestra, for me, I was kind of proud, you know. On one tour in the United States, the orchestra was misinformed. I remember in Washington how long it would take to Philadelphia, and actually it took much longer than they thought. So the orchestra was not in time to play the concert, and so they changed already in the bus, and then the orchestra arrived in the bus and just jumped on the stage and played the concert, and played very well, you know. And so I thought, okay, that's not that you can't achieve that with any orchestra, you know. So in these things, they are unbelievable, you know. And concentrating and really, you know, if things are different, we are even better, you know. With a beautiful seriousness sometimes, they could make music, also fun. It's a wide range of possibilities to get a certain sound with the orchestra, to get back to the sound they loved. And this was, of course, kind of Klemperer tradition. I think I fit in those days pretty well, you know. You love these people, the musicians, too, because they remain human beings. They loved playing, they loved music, they loved to give their best, you know, and they want to prove life can be beautiful, in spite that's for them sometimes very hard, you know. So altogether, happy birthday to the Philharmonia Orchestra. All my best wishes.